Well, hi everybody, meteorologist Joe Cioffi. Welcome to the Joe Cioffi Weather Show on this Tuesday night, the 19th of November. I always said that once we get past Halloween, to me, the rest of the year is just like one long day from November 1st to about December 26th. And then I don't really count the days between that and New Year's. That's just sort of filler, where everything really slows down to a grinding halt and everybody is just kind of going through the holidays. This time goes very quickly. Thanksgiving is next week. And of course, this is also a time of year where a lot is going on in everyone's lives. So why not take some time out of your busy schedule and just relax in front of a good old weather live stream. So tomorrow, just as a reminder, we are going to be at the Bayonne Library in Bayonne, New Jersey, and that is at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. I will be live streaming that library appearance, and I know a number of you are going to be there. The chairman is going to be there, Scott Briller, and I think Izzy is going to be there as well, and a few others are coming. The chairman will be monitoring the live stream tomorrow night for questions, so by all means, while I'm doing my presentation, if you've got any questions, we'll just get them on there on the chat board, and we will hopefully be able to address them. So all is going forward with that. I have to tell you that I spent half the day trying to figure out the mystery of the audio issues and with Skype, and I must tell you, I actually achieved success. So I think I got the audio problems resolved. So the next time Joe Rayo comes on, you should be able to hear him as well as you can hear me. And I think you're hearing me fine because I don't see anyone saying that there is an issue. So yes, by the way, that is a goatee. I have on here Tim, and I see Charlie. You've noticed it too. Yeah, I decided now. I've been wanting to grow it back. I used to have it. I used to have one. I really looked like a serial killer. Okay, but it's been a few years. I shaved it off when my daughter got one of my daughters got married. So I haven't grown it since. And where I was working would not permit facial hair, even though facial hair was being shown up on other networks and other television stations. But now I don't answer to anyone but myself. So that's it. And we got the goatee going. So going forward with the weather pattern in the next 10 days or so, it's pretty interesting. November's a funny month. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of the month of March, where you're budding out of one season, you're coming out of winter, and you're heading into spring, and the atmosphere is in a rather turbulent state during the month of March because each day you're getting that much more sunlight, that much more heating. In November, it's a bit in reverse. Actually, it is in reverse. You are losing sunlight each day. You get a little less daytime heating, and at the same time, you still have vestiges of the warmer times of the summer and early fall, and that creates some storminess and some volatility. But it's hard to really kind of settle into a pattern during the month of November. It seems like the atmosphere is jumping around in all different directions. We saw that last week with the very cold temperatures. And in fact, take a look if you can. Capital Weather Gang put up an article just the other day. I think I saw it was yesterday, about how cold it has been in the Washington, D.C. area this month. It's actually been colder than many recent Decembers. So the November certainly playing a role of producing below normal temperatures, at least in that portion of the mid-Atlantic states. We saw a lot of records being set last week in terms of record cold, all the way down to Miami with record cold high temperatures. Now, of course, things have kind of settled a little bit. I think the atmosphere is still, in a sense, trying to figure out where it's going to go with the overall pattern. I don't think that you can reach any conclusions by anything that you've seen so far. or you're about to see with regards to the weather pattern going forward over the next 10 days or so. So let's just be clear about the fact that if you think I'm going to be able to, or anybody can give you an answer about what it's going to be like in December or January or February or March or for the whole winter from this vantage point, you can't. Okay, I really, though, my the dark humor side of me really wants to go on certain weather boards and just proclaim that winter is over even before it started, just to see, just to get see some of the extreme weather weenies just walk their way toward the edge of the precipice, about ready to jump. But the truth is, you really don't know. I often have found that the best approach is to just kind of watch the patterns evolve. Let the weather take you. Don't try to force it in terms of what models are taking you, but have the actual weather take you down the road. You'll be far more sane, believe me, if you are an avid observer of weather. If you follow what's going on rather than trying to make it happen from the standpoint of what models are doing. That is just really an exercise in total futility, if you ask me. So why don't we'll get started tonight. And one of the things that's been going on in terms of the overall action is that it has shifted. We have seen it shift a bit to the west, and that is a bit of a change. We've been getting used to this trough in the east business, and now we're seeing the watches and warnings being concentrated in a large area in the southwest. And we have a large, much of the state of Arizona, in fact, right now is up under some kind of flash flood watch. You have various winter storm warnings, winter storm watches, and winter weather advisories up in parts of Southern California and the Sierra Nevadas, back across Nevada, in Utah. It's not uniform covering the whole state. There's a lot of it's kind of patchwork, I guess, is the best way to describe it. The mountainous terrain is impacting the weather system that's in the southern part of the jet stream. And we're also seeing some winter storm warnings up in parts of Colorado and into Wyoming with various advisories surrounding that. We also have winter weather advisories and a small slither of winter storm warnings up near the Canadian border, up in Montana. And you see that is lined up east-west, and that's because we have two jet streams at work. We have been describing it as what is called the split flow. You'll see it better when we show you the upper air maps in just a little bit. But the split flow makes a challenging job even more challenging because of the fact that now, instead of dealing with just one jet stream, one stream of energy in terms of trying to make a forecast, you're dealing with two. And that opens up all sorts of crazy possibilities with timing, with strength, with do they phase, don't they phase. That really is probably the biggest variable in the equation that we're going to be dealing with going forward, in that we're going to see various timing differences from model run to model run, which at times will try and show phased-in systems that look strong, and then when you see them a bit later on later model runs, perhaps not as strong because now the streams are staying a bit more separate. A couple of things are happening here on the U.S. satellite loop that I think are notable. First off, with respect to what's going on in the east, it's really kind of an exercise in frustration here with trying to get weather conditions to improve. My menu got huge here, but that's because I made the satellite a little extra big. Let me reduce it, and that'll probably make things a little easier to draw. Okay. So here's our U.S. loop, and you guys can see that okay. Good. So what's happening here is, at least tonight, we have the trough in the east. It is if you look at where the western edge of the clouds, this is a really kind of a broad bowl type trough that's sitting in the east coast. And there's a lot going on here. You have, of course, the energy involved with the system that we had over the weekend. That has actually moved out over New Brunswick, Newfoundland. You have additional energy out in the Atlantic. You've got some more swinging around now through the southeast, and there's still more upstream. All of this kind of strewn out energy over this large geographic area is really making it very, very difficult for one single storm system to just develop, intensify, and pretty much clean house and get everything out of the way. And that's really been the problem here in the East since Sunday, because we've been kind of stuck in all of this. That coastal low over the weekend never really wound. It just was a mess. When you looked at it in terms of the structure on the satellite, you could see various circulations running around all over the place. And it just made for a very, this sort of disorganized mess that resulted in very raw conditions and cloudy conditions and not a whole lot of rain, except for what was going on, of course, in the coastal Carolinas. That was a bit of a different story because you were closer to the coastal low. You had to deal with coastal flooding and some heavy rains out in the Outer Banks. Understood. You also had some snow and a little bit of accumulating snow up the middle and upper Hudson Valley and into parts of New England, and also a little bit of freezing precipitation. But from the standpoint of seeing an entire geographic area kind of getting wiped out in one way or another, either with rain or snow or both, just never really did happen because of the fact that you've got, this huge bowl here in the east. In the meantime, you've got another jet stream in play, and that's the southern part of the jet stream, and that is evidenced by this upper low that is down in the southwest, and that is coming eastward slowly but surely. We also have new energy that is dropping down in the northern part of the jet, and as we said, part of the game going forward is going to be figuring out how we are, how these two streams are going to interact with each other. How much of that northern energy is going to get involved with the southern energy? Is it going to time out correctly? Are you going to see that phasing? Is the southern energy going to run out ahead? Is it going to get sheared apart? Is it going to hold together? Big questions, and confidence in terms of terms of forecasting this, confidence is going to be extra low. Quick mention here, by the way, we have the season's, I believe it's 17 now, the 17th tropical storm, if my count is correct, in Sebastian, forming northeast of the Leeward Islands. And one of the things that if you look close enough on this loop, you're going to see right on the edge is where the circulation is. The low-level circulation is actually pretty well exposed on all sides except the east side. So this is not... this is dealing with wind shear. And of course, if you look to the northwest, you've got this frontal boundary that is sitting there. Let me see if I can get a better shot here. I've pulled away from the NOAA shot, the GIF of this. Top winds, by the way, 45 miles an hour at 20.6 and 59.7. And that is roughly, let's see where it goes on the public advisory. 275 miles northeast of the northernmost Leeward Islands. And you notice it's a pretty short advisory here. There are no warnings or anything like that are posted. But when we look at the satellite loop, you're going to notice on this type view, let it load. I think you'll be able to see it. You can see it now. You can see that low-level circulation that's being exposed, and the cloud tops are kind of getting blown away more toward the southwest and northeast. So don't expect this to develop in anything. And of course, you've got that frontal boundary to the northwest of it. So eventually, it's all going to get absorbed by all of that. And Sebastian will probably be gone, excuse me, in a couple of days. I also don't expect it to have any kind of material impact as far as the overall weather is concerned. Now, on the radar tonight, taking a look, I'll give it a fresh view. Still seeing some precip moving out of Maine finally. Seeing a little bit of scattered shower activity off the North Carolina coast and some more showers moving through Kentucky and Tennessee. Up to the Great Lakes, a little bit of action around Chicago, but not very much. Now you're looking at snow across northern Montana in the area where we have advisories and some winter storm warnings. And of course, now you're also seeing the rain that is moving in, and some heavy rains into the southern half of Arizona and into parts of Southern California. So the radars are going to be pretty busy here for the overnight period. In the east, we're waiting for another surface low to form. It actually is starting to form east of the North Carolina coast. If you notice, I'm going to bring the map up to where we have the weekend system, which is sitting right on the south coast of Newfoundland. It's a 994-ish low. But you move down into New England and across the Great Lakes. It's not often that you see this, particularly this time of year. But you'll notice there's hardly an isobar from there westward back over into almost back. You have to go almost back into northwestern Minnesota, North Dakota to find the first real isobar. There's virtually no flow here. So we need to get a little bit of development. Something has to happen in terms of a low developing offshore that will finally help to pull all of this out to the east and cause weather conditions to improve. So it's really kind of a weak pressure pattern going on up and down the East Coast. There's no real strong high. It's a low pressure map. Look at the high. It's only a 1014 high. So it's not like you're seeing highs, pressures up in the 1020s, even up in Canada, where you normally would see some higher pressures this time of year in many instances up in the 1040 plus range. We're only seeing some highs up in the mid 1020s. So it is, it's what I would describe as a low pressure map. And of course, you've got all this action going on now in the Southwest, where you've got this upper low that's moving in and going to create some havoc going forward. So we're going to take a look at what the overall pattern is with respect to what this split flow it means to the overall weather pattern going forward, and the difficulties, as I said, with respect to the forecast. You're looking at the upper air jet from over the weekend, and of course, one of the signature things that we lost was that Canadian connection. If you watch the upper flow out in the Pacific, we've got part of it that goes down to the south. And we've already seen one system being produced out of that, and that was the weekend low up the East Coast. And here's the next one that is being produced. And you also have, a bit of a jet that goes across Canada from west to east. But it's a west to east flow from Canada, which means that the air is pretty much running seasonal rather than getting that cross polar flow where you wind up with the flow coming down from northern Canada into the plains and Great Lakes and down into the mid-Atlantic states and southeast. So this is a bit of a different look to it, but definitely showing signs of the split flow that I've been describing and talking about. And going forward, now I'm leaving that initial look to it so that you can see what it's like now that we're on to Tuesday. And you start to see there's some things have changed and some things have remained. There's a bit of changing going on in the Pacific, and there is a bit of changing going on in the eastern part of the United States as we're at Tuesday now. And of course, we're dealing with, as I described, this this broad bowl trough in the eastern U.S. But you saw how things are changing a bit, and you're beginning to see, this split flow playing out fairly well. Ridge builds up in the Gulf of Alaska toward Alaska. You've got part of this jet that drives down off of Baja California and then swings up off the East Coast. You've got your trough here in the east. You have a shortwave trough that's in the northwest that's coming in. And, of course, you've got this upper low east of Baja California that is going to be creating the problems in the southwest. One of the things that I'm noticing with respect to the overall pattern is you'll notice that there's amplitude here, a lot of ups and downs. So you're getting quite a bit of the air masses are displaced. So you're getting warmer air masses trying to move north, colder air masses trying to move south. in some parts of this look of the northern hemisphere. So this would certainly suggest that we could probably see some disruption in the overall weather patterns going forward, where things are going to be changing. If you had that fire hose jet that I've often described that we had last year, doesn't really change very much. You're moving air west to east. You're not really moving air north to south. So there's there's not a whole lot of volatility in that east-west fire hose type pattern. We don't see really any sign of that. If it does appear, it's very temporary. It's not a permanent thing. And as we move through this week, the split is in play with that southern shortwave. If you notice the northern and southern streams here, the northern stream energy is moving faster than the southern stream energy. More energy is dropping down into the southwest, but by the time we get to Friday, the northern stream trough is already moving through the Great Lakes. You still have the southern energy that is down in Arizona. There's even some more sitting northwest of San Francisco. And of course, you've got this Pacific flow that's going to continue and drive some more. You also have a little bit of, the upper flow in Canada has turned a little more northwesterly. So you have a little bit more colder air, not a lot, but you get some colder air to come down into the United States. But it's not to the extent of what we saw when we had the big ridge up in the west and that very, very cold air that came down from Western Canada that we had for last week. But nonetheless, it's a pretty active look here. And that is also a tricky look because, again, as I pointed out, you've got northern stream and southern stream energies to figure out. And I just left out one shortwave that I just drew in. That is coming into the Pacific Northwest on Friday. So we've got a lead shortwave in the northern jet. There's another one behind it. And then, of course, you've got these pieces in the south. And every model run's going to behave differently, especially in that southern stream, because there has to be something upstream in order to kind of kick it along. And that is going to impact timing. You'll notice that we've got a trough coming through here later on Friday. So that probably says a cold front goes by. And then that southern energy comes out. But you also have this northern energy here, which is dropping in right there. And here's your southern energy. So now we're at Saturday. So what is that going to do? Well, there's probably going to be some kind of wave that's going to come out to the northeast and move its way. I have that arrow drawn too far south, but the bottom line is it's going to move its way up toward the northeast in some fashion. What we'll have to figure out is, well, how long do these two streams stay separate, or do they phase? On this particular model run, they actually phased quite impressively to our west and north, and that might suggest that we could see a primary low going perhaps up to western Pennsylvania or southeastern Ohio. If we have a bit more of a separate look where the two streams take longer to phase or maybe don't phase at all, and the southern stream energy just kind of lifts up, then you could wind up with a low that goes much further to the south into, say, eastern Tennessee or western Virginia, western North Carolina, and then maybe redevelop somewhere off the Maryland-Delaware coast Saturday night and Sunday. So the timing with these split flows is going to be critical, and you're not going to really know which way this is going to go until you get closer. And models are going to be, doing their dance and going all over the place with respect to that. Once this plays out, we're going to see that trough lift out, and you'll notice that very quickly more energy drops down into the west. And now we're into next week, and it looks like we're going to see the trough in the western half of the United States, and that probably could mean that we could see a fairly sizable storm perhaps move up toward the Great Lakes along about, say, the middle of next week, Wednesday, the big travel day for Thanksgiving. And the trough, at least through next week, stays in the west. But we also are beginning to see signs of some blockiness showing up in northern Canada, and that might drive the trough back to the east over time as we go to the long range. That, I think, when I look at this and you see where you see all the blue area is below normal heights or below normal pressures. And they are more in the lower latitudes than they are in the upper latitudes. If you go up to the north across northern Canada and through the polar region, I'm out at day 11 or 12 here on the long range, by the way. But you'll see that all through this region, if the model verifies that pressures are running pretty much above normal. This is what you would see where you have a negative Arctic oscillation or even a negative North Atlantic oscillation would help to do this. And of course, you're seeing lower pressures down in the middle latitudes all across the Pacific and the Atlantic. So this is a much different type of look from what we saw last winter. And where it takes us is still a mystery. I think you're going to see a lot of volatility and a lot of evolution going on in the models going forward. And I think it's probably pretty important that we pay attention to that trend, even though we are going to see these changes from day to day in terms of the snapshots that we're going to see on the overall teleconnection models, which is really what they signal are. They're just snapshots of each model run. I can already tell you that big differences from back just days ago when we had the PNA index being strongly positive going through the rest of the month of November, and we pointed out yesterday how this sort of flipped in a big way, still remains very negative. So this kind of favors more of a trough in the west, ridge in the east, but it's not that simple. There are other geographic areas that are used in calculating the PNA, so you have to really look to see where the exact pressure changes are that are having the biggest impact. And one of these days, we'll do a live stream where we'll just kind of look at those areas in particular. We did do the East to Pacific oscillation back a couple of weeks ago. The NAO, now if you're going to have these lows coming up the East Coast and going out in the Atlantic somewhere between 40 north and 60 north and running across, that's going to help drive the North Atlantic oscillation negative, but not in a strong way. It's only, a little, not quite to minus 100. So it's not really that impressive, but it is slightly negative pretty much through the forecast period. The EPO is going positive, not in a big way either. There's a big spike early in this when we get into the weekend. The positive EPO, the East Pacific oscillation, is not good for cold air coming into the United States. And I've said many times, the EPO to me is the one that's the most important. If you get this thing to be strongly negative, and you can get a few of the other drivers to get involved, you could wind up with a very, very cold weather pattern. And we saw an example of that back last week. So why don't we let's look at the day to day. Let me just erase that. Get the new region. We'll go back to the U.S. because there's going to be a lot to look at here on both sides of the coin. So we'll roll back. I'm going to use the 18Z GFS, which was a little bit different than the 12Z. But running out for tonight and tomorrow, of course, you're seeing this coastal low, this second coastal low that develops off the North Carolina coast. Actually brings a little bit of precip to coastal southeastern New England tomorrow afternoon. But I think we're going to see general improvement everywhere else. And that should be then followed by high pressure that starts to build in. You get a fairly decent northwest wind tomorrow. So finally we're going to get the air to move a little bit and clean house. And of course, meanwhile, you've got this nonsense going on in the southwest, and that's producing some snows. There's not a whole lot of cold air. There's some cold air. It's seasonal cold air. It's not very cold Canadian air, and that's why you're seeing mixed precip even in areas up into northeastern Colorado and into southwestern Nebraska. Maybe you normally might see, if you had a bit more cold air to work with coming down out of western Canada, that you'd see a much more impressive area of snow. But you're not, the pattern is not the best when it comes to cold air. Now, there's your first energy running out in the northern stream, carries a cold front, which moves through the east on Friday. Meanwhile, the southern stream shortwave, let me run that back. You'll see that southern stream energy kind of waits, and then it comes out for Friday night and for Saturday. This is on the GFS. And this was a run where you saw some phasing. Now, Saturday morning, interestingly enough, you do have some cold air advecting behind Friday's system, which intensifies into a nice little low there between New Brunswick and Newfoundland on Friday night. So you do get some cold advection coming down on Saturday. But there's no big high to the north. There's actually a low pressure that is moving across southern Canada, dominating the lower pressures, dominating much of southern Canada, and not higher pressures. So if you're talking about frozen precipitation, you're going to have to do it with whatever cold air you can manufacture. And this time of year, that's kind of tough. The two streams, the northern and southern stream on this run, phase a bit more. So you are seeing a surface low that moves into southeast Ohio and into western New York, and then eventually just kind of redevelops probably right on the New Jersey coast, and there's a low over Long Island, a 95 low, by the time we get to Sunday afternoon. So this is much different. If we look back at the prior model run here, it had a less phased look to it in the upper air, and as a result, you wound up with a low that was much further to the south, actually a little bit weaker initially, much further to the south, and there's your low in southeastern Virginia. So I don't know how many, that's several hundred miles from there to about Erie, Pennsylvania, or southwest New York, which is where the 18Z run of the GFS has it. And it really is about the fact that the upper air is much less phased on this run. You can see it here on the GFS upper air. Your northern stream and your southern stream energy are pretty much separate here. Oh, there's your northern stream energy, there's your southern stream energy. Now, jump to, doesn't mean it's right, by the way. Either run, both runs could be wrong. I mean, and very likely are. We may still be in this sort of evolutionary process here. But I'm going to switch from the 12Z. We'll switch to the 18Z run. And you see look at that. That's a huge difference here in the upper air. It's a much more developed upper low that is actually cutting off in Wisconsin. The whole northern part of the trough just explodes here. The southern part it's not as nearly as distinct, and it's also timed out. It's probably a little bit further to the west, so it's got a much more phased look here. And a more phased look is going to want to take a surface low, at least a primary low, much further to the west. You may eventually get a secondary low to develop, but it develops well up to the north. This is the mid-cycle run. It's a possibility. It will all depend on the timing out of those two streams. And that's why I say that how much fun and frustrating it can be forecasting and dealing with a split flow. Now, once that goes out, in the west, the next low gets ready because you've got the next energy dropping in. Just to review, I'll bring the upper air map, and we'll run this back, and then we'll go back to the surface. But there's your eastern energy moving out, and already the next trough is dropping into the west Sunday night and Monday, and that's also pretty impressive. You've got a fairly wrapped up upper low in North Texas here, the trough in the west, and you have the beginnings of what's going to probably be some ridging here in the eastern part of the United States. So what happens? You get a fairly wrapped up low that starts to come out. I'll just run it backwards here. I have the actual map that shows precip amounts and not the radar. But here's your low in northeast New Mexico, and you've got this snow that breaks out across Colorado during the day, Monday into Monday night. And then you've got this on the GFS, if you want to believe it, a wrapped up that's a 981 low in northern Oklahoma. That is a really wrapped up low. That's very deep, very intense. And it gets to a 78 low in southern Kansas. by the time we get to next Tuesday afternoon, and then finds its way northeastward. Now, if this is correct, this would probably produce a major snowstorm / blizzard across the Central Plains and eventually up into Iowa and Minnesota and maybe even into northwest Wisconsin. I'm not 100% sure yet if we're going to see something this wrapped up. The outcome of this is going to be dependent on whatever happens with the lead system. But certainly I could see the possibility that we could wind up with a rather strong system in the middle of the country for the middle of next week. The European model is not that different, by the way. The European does show a fairly wrapped up low heading up toward the Great Lakes. And, of course, it does push a very strong frontal boundary here to the East Coast with showers, strong southerly flow ahead of it. So the travel day next Wednesday will be quite an interesting day from the standpoint of rain and strong south to southwest winds and maybe even some thunderstorms in a couple of places if this winds up verifying. That's a very, very intense gale center. So something we're going to have to pay attention to. Models have been kind of going back and forth on this to some degree. They've been leaning on the idea that something strong is going to be out for the middle part of next week, heading for the Great Lakes. And then, of course, we've got more energy coming into the Northwest for the middle of next week for Thanksgiving. And it looks like there could be some snows up in the northern Rockies for Thanksgiving Day, while the rest of the country kind of calms down a bit. Action in New England until the frontal boundary flips out and heads into eastern Canada. And then, of course, that's replaced by a kind of a cold northwest flow of air for Thursday and into Friday. Quick shot of cold air, warms up ahead of the next frontal boundary. And then after that, it's a matter of seeing how the whole upper air sets up, and we're starting to get into the month of December. And I still think we're at a period here where the atmosphere is it's a time where the atmosphere is in flux. Make no conclusions about which way it's going to go from the standpoint of the wintertime. I don't think anybody really knows that, and we'll just have to wait and see. But it's just kind of an interesting. It's an interesting pattern to see the split flow. You don't see it too often. I don't think we hardly saw it any time last year. Again, it's a challenge to forecast, and under certain conditions, it can be a very, very a pattern that can produce quite a bit of snow for the east if you have all the other players on the table at the same time. Lisa Marie Nieves, thank you so much for being a Facebook supporter and being on Patreon and hitting Super Chat tonight. I really, really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. Is it possible that this storm heads out to sea with more of a colder solution? So I'll answer that. I'm going to say that you're asking that about the Sunday system. I think it's possible. There's a fair chance that it'll be, and it's the minute I say this, it's going to be the opposite of what I say. Hang on a second. Taking a swig of water here. I think there's a fair chance that you could wind up seeing an unfazed solution. Therefore, a weaker upper look for the upper air, a weaker primary low that goes further south, and then redevelops and moves on out east of Maryland and south of New Jersey. The earlier runs did actually have a fairly wrapped up low southeast of Long Island, and the European in particular would argue that you probably could have enough do-it-yourself cold air so that there might even be accumulating snows for interior southern New England and then on northward. But I would be really cautious about even going down that road right now because of the fact that do-it-yourself cold air is is always tough. I see Mr. Rayo has responded on the chat. Yes, I did. It's just plain water, by the way. I'm being very good. It's not mixed with anything, okay? It's just plain water, I swear. But it's nice to see you on board. And by the way, Joe, I figured out the audio issue with Skype And you should, the next time we have you on, you will be at the same volume level as me. So everybody will be able to hear you clearly. I know the volume was a little bit low last night, but you'll be in better shape tomorrow. It was just a matter of finding a setting and changing it. And it took me a little while, but I did succeed. Chuck Cardillo. You also have the gray goatee look. Okay, yeah, that's my new thing. Did I notice the Pepsi logo on the 10 millibar? No, I didn't. Where was the Pepsi logo? I mean, I'm thinking that it looked like the Pepsi logo, and I got to tell you something with respect to the whole. Everybody's talking about the stratosphere and an impending stratospheric warming event. I kind of learned my lesson from last year. I'm gonna stay away from that to a certain degree. I'm not gonna address it very much because last year everybody was it's going to split. The vortex is going to split. The vortex was going to split, and the vortex did split, and it did split in the end of January. And you know what? It made no difference. It did nothing. It really didn't make any difference in terms of the overall pattern last year because you had the El Nino and you had the Pacific Jet being too strong. That was really the Pacific Jet. I think really was the dominating factor of last year. But this year you don't have that fire hose jet. You're actually starting to see traffic in the Atlantic because you had a fire hose jet in the Atlantic as well, but you don't have that this year. So with traffic in the Atlantic, I think that maybe allows for more opportunities for storms to develop and move up the East Coast instead of moving out offshore. So I think that part of it is different. Somebody had sent me a message, and I'm sorry, I can't remember where the message was. I have to go back and find it. But I don't really follow all these different oscillations, and there's the Southern Oscillation, and there's the Antarctic Oscillation. I was looking today, and now there's the NPA, which is the MPO, which is the North Pacific Oscillation, which covers an area south of Alaska and then going west. I mean, you can go all day with this. The Madden-Julian Oscillation, all that stuff. I can't follow it all. I don't have a head for it. I really don't. I'm a short-range type of guy. I like to stay inside the 2-week time frame. I like to deal with the maps that are in front of me and let the folks that really know that sort of stuff follow it. So it's hard for me to really address it. Somebody messaged me saying that the numbers with the Southern Oscillation Index indicate that there's an El Nino going on. I mean, if you look at the water temperatures out in the Pacific, the last I checked, if you want to make the case that there's a very, very weak El Nino, I guess you could. But from the standards of what the Weather Service uses, which I think is inside that -1 normal and +1 in terms of temperatures, it's inside that range. So technically, there is no El Nino. I think there's too much time spent on trying to find these magic bullets that I think that you think are going to give you the absolute answer to the kind of winter it's going to be. And I would just tell you, and if Mr. Rayo is on board still, he'll probably agree with me. This winter, there will be stretches of cold. There will be stretches of not so cold. There will be stretches occasionally of mild or even warm, depending on where you are. In that mix, there will be stretches where we will see some snow, and stretches where we won't see much snow, and maybe we'll see more rain than anything else. I'm not trying to be sarcastic, or maybe I am just a little bit, but it's just that it's November 19th. This was hilarious, being that it's November 19th. I have already seen people writing off the entire winter based on the weather that's gone on in the last 4 weeks. I mean, seriously, that's isn't even long-range forecasting. That's not meteorology, and it's not even long-range forecasting or climatology. That's like emotional, baby anger that's coming out, and you need to sort of stop it. Okay, so I've got my little rant in there. Alfred Necht, hope I pronounced it right. It's a matter of time till these quirks get in tune with signs of an aligning for an interesting time, especially in a few weeks, lasting through mid-March. You're saying 50 inch. Excuse me. So your first significant snow around. You didn't give the date. Joe Rayo, when we went to college, we each took a course, Couching 101. Pretty much. That really is what it is. It's sort of like it's Friday evening or Monday morning quarterbacking in a way. I don't know. Maybe we should have a weather forecasting fantasy league like they have these football fantasy leagues. I don't know how you would do it, but I can just imagine some of the things that people would be doing in a weather fantasy league. My prediction for snow this winter will be between 1 and 100. With David Schwartz, that's probably, you got a fair chance of being correct. We wind up less than an inch. That's the only way you lose. And I don't think you have to worry about going over 100. Scott Briller will be monitoring the chat tomorrow night. I will be at the Bayonne Library in Bayonne, New Jersey at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. So Scott will be monitoring the chat while I'm doing my thing. So if you guys have any questions, and I'll try to keep an eye on things as well, but it's hard when you're doing, I'm doing my regular live stream and switching video pictures and everything else and maps and so on. So that right there requires me to have 3 hands and 2 brains. But now let's add, doing it at the library just makes it extra tough. So Scott said he'd monitor the chat. If you've got comments or questions, he'll pass them along, and we'll see if we'll be able. I'll try to address as many as I can. And if you do have a question, by the way, and I don't get to it for whatever reason, I apologize ahead of time for that. But you can always get the question to me. Either on Facebook or on Twitter, or you can, go on, if you're on my Patreon page, you can definitely send it that way, message me that way, and I'll be more than happy to answer your question. And you know what? Since last night's live stream with Joe went long, I'm a little tired tonight, and I've got to get ready for tomorrow. So, which means I got to head toward New Jersey. Believe it or not, I'm leaving now for that area. To get set for tomorrow. So, thanks for being here tonight. Just check the website and check out the latest posts. Patreon members, there'll be the usual stuff for you guys. Weather at least has turned a little quiet for the middle part of this week, so it gives me a bit of a breather. And as far as the app goes, of course, that's updated. So be sure you've downloaded the app, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, on Google Play or on the App Store. And also Angry Ben's weather app, the Angry Weatherman, which you can get on Google Play. So we'll see you tomorrow night. If you're in New Jersey, if you're near Bayonne, come on out to the Bayonne Library at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, and we'll see you tomorrow night on the live stream.